and welcome to the Bedroom Studios podcast, the podcast where we talk about what goes on behind the scenes in a musician's world and bridge the industry gap by bringing their stories, expertise, and advice to early career artists. Subscribe to join us for a fun chat about life as a creative person, tips and tricks for pursuing an artistic career, navigating the music industry, and more. I am your host, Emma, and today I will be interviewing Giancarlo Binetti. Giancarlo Binetti is a French horn player and conductor based in the Greater Toronto Area. He started music in high school at Father Michael McGivney Catholic Academy in Markham and went on to do a Bachelor of Classical Performance in French horn at York University, as well as a master's degree in musicology, focusing on the study of wind band conducting, the role of the artistic director, and concert band administration in Ontario. He frequently plays and conducts in community bands like Rouge River Winds and the Toronto Youth Wind Orchestra, leads a brass quintet, participates in independent freelance projects, and subs for semi-professional orchestras all around the GTA. Giancarlo works closely with Colin Clarke as an assistant to his youth orchestras, leading occasional rehearsals and sectionals as needed. He also has private teaching experience, and his brass studio is open for all students. I'm so happy you're on the podcast.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for the decorated introduction. Yeah, I have some qualifications, but I always feel like, oh man, am I really all of this? That the titles I claim to have, like, do I really deserve them? Anyway.
Well, I think we all feel the same way.
Imposter syndrome. That's we're getting right into it. That's a preview of things to come.
I find that when we read, or when I or other people read the bio, where it lists everything that we've done, it can feel like we could feel the imposter syndrome a lot more.
I did all of that?
Because, yeah.
Like, what?
Because it's like you don't see that it was like over a period of time. It seems like it's like yesterday you did X, Y, Z, all these things.
When I was doing them, I was like, am I really doing these things? And then I get them done. I'm like, oh yeah, I actually did those things. Yeah. So, yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Thanks. Thank you. But we do it because we love it, right? That's why we're here. I was involved with Toronto Youth Wind Orchestra and Rouge River Winds before I was interested in conducting, really. The time I joined the bands was like about 2017, and I wasn't like super into conducting at that point. I was like, oh, it might be cool. And then even my mom was saying, I think you're going to be a conductor when you grow up. At that point, I was like, I don't know why you're saying that, but here we are. Yeah, moms always know. And but yeah, I joined those groups because I liked being in them. And then I really liked those groups particularly. I've joined some other groups and they were cool, didn't really stay with them. But these two have been really rock solid since 2017. Cared a lot about them. So that's why I've continued to stay. And then just as I was getting interested in conducting through school, I was like, okay, I want to conduct, so how do I do it? And really, one of the only most obvious answers was to ask the bands that I've been part of for so long. Like, that's the thing about conducting in a group, is like, you just got to ask.
Yeah.
Generally, when I'm in rehearsal, the time flies, and it's like, yes, I'm tired from work, but it's not like every rehearsal I go to, like, being tired from work stops me from being as present, or, sometimes it does, though. Surprisingly, there are certain days where, I'm really tired after work, and I'm like, okay, I don't want to really be here right now. And there's certain moments in rehearsal I'm like, okay, just want to get through this. But mostly I do it because I do enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only thing that I hate about all the time I spend in rehearsal is that I don't have enough time with my partner. Mm-hmm. And we are really attached at the hip, and I just want more time with them. They want more time with me. But it's hard. It's very, very hard. I'm going to say that a lot. And I know everyone has difficulties in life, but yeah, balancing time is something I'm working on.
Yeah.
A lot.
Especially for musicians, like rehearsals and performances and gigs, they happen in the evening. But then if you're also working a full-time job, you have to wake up super early for that, and that happens for the whole day. And then there's more concerts on the weekend, more rehearsals on the weekend. So it's like everything kind of fits together, but it doesn't leave a lot of time.
To add to that, not only do I work full-time, I work retail.
Mm-hmm.
So retail hours are not just 9 to 5. They're like 9:30 to 6 on some days, and then 12:45 to 9:15 on other days.
For those of you who don't know, we're both in Rouge River Winds together. That's how we met, but I'm subbing for Toronto Youth Wind Orchestra, and you're part of that band. So we're playing a concert today.
Yeah, we are in between two concerts right now. We've played one at 11:30, and we're going to play another one at 11:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. So it's a long, long day for us. I thought it was a really good time to schedule this podcast, so here we are.
So I want to talk more about you as a conductor. You mentioned that you got into conducting through school. How did that happen?
It's very hard to honestly say, like, one day I was not interested, and then another day I was. I've always felt like an inclined, like, a sense of leadership as a musician. Through high school, like, I was the only French horn player for grades 10, 11, and 12, really, as well. Like, those 3 grades, I was, like, the only one in the band, in the respective band. And then in grade 12, there were other horn players, grade 9 and 10 horn players that were playing in the junior band, and I believe my music teacher was the one who, like, asked me to kind of coach them a little bit. So I think it kind of started there. I also just found myself understanding, like, music theory and math, too. I was also really big into math in high school. And I also found myself being able to explain things in a way that a lot of people could understand them. And I know this, you're asking about conducting, but I believe, like, conducting and leadership are, like, obviously, like, hand in hand. But it's not just because you're waving a stick. It's everything outside of the waving a stick that
like the artistic director.
Exactly, and hence my research for my master's, and, you know, the role of the artistic director, all that. But conducting itself, I took a conducting course in 3rd year at York. I was taught by Dr. Lizette Canton. She's a really, really great choral conductor, really fantastic choral leader, and she leads the Ottawa Bach Choir. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed learning from her. And I went on to do an independent conducting course with Bill Thomas, who is you know Bill Thomas?
It's a composer, right?
I guess you could call it, that's how you would know him.
So I believe we played some of his music in my undergrad, I think. You very likely did. He was my professor. He was the leader of the Wind Symphony at York, and he was my thesis advisor for my master's. And he taught me independent conducting. And from then on, with that, and being in Rouge River Winds and Taiwo, having Pratik and Colin as my conductors, like, I was just like, I'm thoroughly impressed. And I guess I was pretty motivated to kind of try to have the same impact on people as they did at the time. And it's weird how it kind of develops, how some inclinations and some interests develop in a way that you don't really expect. And it's it's really, really hard for me to retrace the steps, but I just know that I got here somehow, and those are the kind of, like, milestones, I guess, is, like, meeting those people and doing those things. Yeah. When you first got in front of the band to conduct, how was that experience?
Oh, man. So it's a very complex answer, because the first time I ever got in front of a band to conduct was in my grade 12. I was grade 12, and I was conducting the grade 10 band. Don't remember much of that. You know what the one thing I do remember about conducting in grade 12 is? At the spring concert, I forgot to turn around to the audience and bow. So my music teacher told me, like, okay, make sure you just do that next time. I'm like, okay, dang. Now I feel a little silly, but whatever. Next time I got up to conduct, which was, like, I think I was doing Hobbits from Lord of the Rings, right? That chorale from Hobbits, and I was terrified. I was like waving the stick. I'm just like, am I doing this right? Like, what am I doing? Like, what? Like, I'm allowed to be here? Like, all the anxiety was just over the roof, you know? And I think a lot of conductors do feel that way. But the course helped me a lot. a lot. It really, really helped because like the course I took, basically there was like 15 people taking the same course, and we all were obviously forced to conduct in front of each other. And it's really vulnerable and, scary, but at some point it becomes kind of easier in a way. It's hard to say.
Well, I remember when I first conducted, I got in front of the band, and immediately I was just shaking from head to toe, and you could see when I was holding the stick, you could see the whole thing just quivering.
I know not professionals, but I know like PhD students and people like professors who still do that. So yeah, it's okay.
Like the shaky bow with the violin.
it's revealing, right? Because the whole point of the baton is an extension of your hand. So anything your hand's doing, it's going to exaggerate, right? Yeah. It's normal. That happens a lot. Mm-hmm. I think I get kind of shakes sometimes too. I don't think they're as obvious, thankfully, but the anxiety is over the top. It's just oh my gosh, like when you're up there for the first time and you really like the imposter syndrome is so real. It's like, why am I here? Like what qualifies me to do that? Why am I the one who gets to stand in front of these people and tell them like show them what to do? Like what qualifies me? And the answer is nothing does in reality. Nothing qualifies you. Nothing makes you better than anyone. Nothing makes you automatically more of a leader than anyone else, unless you like kind of want to be, I guess.
What's your preparation process like when you're leading rehearsals?
Make everything big is my biggest advice. Like literally, like write a lot on your scores. Make things really, really big and exaggerated. Trumpets, like knowing where to go in the band is a huge thing about conducting. Which is just like my personal little kind of like 2 cents of advice on conducting. Is like the last symposium I went to, I was told, don't be a global conductor. Don't just look at the band. Look where you're needed. Not where the attention should go, but where you're needed.
Interesting.
Musicians can generally keep an internal sense of rhythm, especially good ones. But if you have something goes like da, 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 and then some other parts of the band are going da 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 da, da singing Halcyon Hearts by Katash Copley. Anyway, it's a good piece.
Both very good composers.
Katash Copley's Halcyon Hearts. The slow thing is gonna go slow. It's just human nature. So you have to like be on them and be like, no, don't slow down. This is the tempo, right? That's your point. That's your purpose as a conductor, is to make sure that like everyone's internal pulse lines up, and you have to go where you're needed, and that's what you mark in the score, and like that's what I do.
Being adaptable to your ensemble as well.
Exactly, and knowing like where your group specifically is needed. That's the kind of thing I mark in the score. I don't do chord analysis. I think like that's just over the top. Like, if you can hear what chord, like I have kind of like a good like ear, I guess. Like I know when I'm on a 1 chord or 4 chord, whatever. And I was like, you have to bring out this note, sure. But I don't do a whole like this is this chord with this note added in, and this is what the harmonic. Yeah, exactly. Like, and especially as a conductor, depending on how much time you have to do your score study, sometimes you have a day, sometimes you have a month, right? And you gotta use that time effectively. Normally, in most cases, when you're conducting, you get time. You get time to like study the score, and especially in your early time conducting, like nobody's gonna ask you to just go up and just do it all of a sudden. Nobody's gonna ask you to do that. You always get the preparation because that's what you need. Mark Chambers is another professor at York who he does the orchestra, and he has a lot of good mantras, and one of his main things about conducting is literally getting in your own space and like physically like taking the space, like rolling your arms around and feeling like you're in kind of like I don't want to call it like a prism or anything limiting.
You're playing.
Yeah, you're like, playing is kind of something else, but like your personal space, like how much space you're going to take, and you take that space. You don't limit yourself. You don't box yourself up. You just make sure that you take your own space, and that really, really helps me in moments where I get kind of nervous and feel like I don't belong there. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's just kind of, I guess, my own philosophy, but I feel like it is a very brave thing to have like the courage and the confidence to take up space, because like a lot of times the world wants us to be either like physically smaller or just to be like smaller, just like being quieter, more palatable to other people. And to be a leader and to guide people, you have to have the courage to take up space and to just be confident where you are, as you are in the moment.
Absolutely. And this is why I'm so happy that I learned conducting from Lizette Canton, because she is no more than 5 feet tall.
Oh.
And the only way she can be present is if she makes herself present. Because, you know, so, no shade to Lizette Canton, but she's so short. And like, yeah, you won't be present unless you, like, puff your chest and stand straight and, like, you know what I mean? Those are the kinds of things that you need to be as a conductor. There are certain things that are negotiable, as, like, when you're learning conducting and, like, oh, you have to do, like, this gesture rather than just, like a lot of it's subjective. Well, the one thing that I personally don't think is, I guess it's kind of ironic to say this is an objective thing because it's coming from kind of my opinion, but you have to be present. You can't be on the podium and like with like making yourself small. Nobody's going to take you seriously. So that's a huge part of it.
It's interesting that you were saying how your prof was a choir conductor. I'm very into like choral pedagogy.
Yeah.
And one thing that is really big in the choir world is the like mirroring and the mirror neurons and stuff like that. So like, especially for the voice, if you're standing in front of stuff, you're conducting, and when you're gesturing, if your shoulders are raised and you're tight and you have if you're holding tension as the conductor, your singers are automatically going to hold tension. And I think it's the same with wind band players. We just don't talk about it as much as we do in the choir world.
We don't talk about it because, you know why? Because choirs tend to be a little bit smaller, and I think there's less room for ego pain.
Oh, I disagree.
Well, okay. Okay, I know what you mean. Sorry.
Oh, there's so many egos in the choirs.
In the choir themselves, but the conductor to the choir is kind of like this.
Oh, like physically on the same level instead of like on a podium?
They're a little bit above. And I would say wind band conductor tends to be here as opposed to...
Interesting.
Yeah, so I know we're not doing video, but like I raised my hands more for the wind band conductor versus
because they need to see you.
The player. Yeah, and that's my whole thing is, choirs they can be big, but usually they're not that big. Like sometimes their chamber choirs are like 8. Most choirs are probably in the realm of 30, maybe a little less. Likely not much more than 30. You're a lot less prone to embarrassment in front of 30 people as opposed to like 60 people. Calling a conductor out in front of a large group is just one of the biggest no-nos.
That's scary.
Yeah, you can't do that, and I learned that the hard way.
I think also because in choirs you're standing up because, and I guess like one of the kind of like the fundamental thing in vocal pedagogy is connecting to your body because it affects the voice so much. And I think that it's the same with wind players, and no one talks about it. And in band we're sitting in chairs, obviously, like it's harder so we can't really be standing while we're playing.
No one talks about it. I'm glad that you. So that's the kind of that's phrase. No one talks about it is the one that got me into this, to my spiel. No one talks about it. You know why they don't talk about it? Because there's no time.
Yeah.
Rehearsing a choir, what do you need? Maybe music stands.
It's very different though. Like
you need
there's
a room.
So many differences, and it's like weird.
But even I'm even talking logistically here. Think for a second, like logistics of rehearsing a choir. You get a room. However big your choir is, you need a room that accommodates the choir.
Like a room, piano,
maybe,
and like they're holding their music.
Or even a keyboard.
Yeah.
Like just something to give pitch, and that's it.
Yeah.
Rehearsing a wind band, you need percussion. You need a room.
Chairs.
You need stands. You need a room that's bigger than can accommodate the amount of people. you need a podium, you need just, there's so many things that go into rehearsing a large group, orchestra, wind band. It's expensive. And there are very few opportunities to talk about these things in a non-educational setting. The only time you're going to talk about musicianship and like sitting up straight, your body being a connection of the instrument, the conductor being a connection to the group, you're only going to talk about it in school. And even in school, you really think a teacher's going to be transparent about like, this is what a conductor does? Like, they're going to sound kind of high and mighty, and you can't admit being wrong in front of kids. And I know, like, I'd like to think that's changing in our generation. Well, I'm a zillennial. You're a Gen Z. I'm a zillennial. I like to think Gen Zs are on the more on the route of like not being high and mighty, not being perfect, like knowingly, like I go through things like you do, and I hope that they can incorporate that in their teaching somehow. Like, yes, still take charge, but admit that you're human and that you make mistakes. I think that goes a long way with kids. It really does. Like, yes.
100%. I think so. There's, obviously like this big push for student choice and like student autonomy and building confidence and like giving students the power in the classroom, having it be more a student-centered thing than a teacher-centered thing, which I think is very positive. Yeah. But I think there also needs to be sort of a shift in what does that actually look like, because I think we're getting into the trap of like, we want students to have choice, we want them to be autonomous, but it's like only if it's the right choice,
right kind of autonomy.
Yeah, or like
doesn't make sense.
Like there needs to be like, we want them to be obedient in the way that they were before, but we want them to have choice, which is kind of contradicting. And so like there needs to be talk about how do we create those cultures of.
My partner always says, I want our kids to be loud. When we eventually have kids, if we do, we want our kids to be loud. And being loud means being safe. That's the first thing. Second thing, being loud means autonomy. And third thing, the less you control them, the less you put shackles on them, the more seriously they're going to take you when you put your foot down on certain things that they like need boundaries for.
Yeah. And if you set those expectations, I don't have kids, but like going back to like with students, like if you see, it's different with every group, and there's no strict black or white rule or formula, like you were saying, but if the students understand the expectations, then they will know, okay, like I have the freedom to be myself, I can be loud, I can act this way and feel comfortable, and then at these certain times, I know that I have to reel it in and pay attention to who's talking and be respectful, but it's like there's that kind of give and take.
If most things are presented as wrong, if most things are like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, they're going to question, what am I allowed to do? If most things they do are not questioned, they're like, you can do this, you can do that, you can do anything you want. But then there's that one odd thing that's like, wait, no.
Yeah.
Wait, then they're going to take it serious. They're going to be like, oh, wait, why am I not allowed to do that? They're always going to ask why.
It's so frustrating to me as a student when, like, because I've had teachers who are phenomenal teachers, and I learned so much from them. I found that I couldn't predict how they would react to certain situations. Like sometimes the class would be talking and making jokes, and they would join in on the jokes or smile, and it would be really chill and fun. But then other times they would be more strict, and like, I've like been in tears like at the end of classes sometimes, just because it's like I don't know how to exist in your class because
I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm just like an emotional person. Like I cry about everything.
No, it's all good. You and my partner would get along well. Sorry, Rat.
But yeah, it's like I don't know how to exist in this environment because like I feel like I have to be smaller and be more palatable because I don't know what the expectation is, right? Like there's no clear expectation. It's like sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not okay.
it's how we were raised. And I really don't want to be ageist, but I see this so much with Gen X and Boomer parents. I really, really do. Like, I hate to paint a general picture. I hate to generalize. I really, really genuinely hate generalizing, but I just see so much of this in that generation. I see so little of this in Gen Z and millennials. Like, that's what I mean. Like, that's what I mean when I say I notice a shift. I notice, like, and I guess maybe I'm kind of biased because I'm part of I'm part of, like, the millennial Gen Z gap, like, cusp. But I swear I've heard boomers and Gen X's, like, all make this observation. Like, they all want to do their own thing. Nobody wants to work anymore. No, they want to work on their terms. They want to work the thing, like, they want to work within an agreement they've been given by you, not beyond that. They realize that their value is more important than stressing themselves out and working beyond what's given, just for to be a team player. And I've been seeing a lot of TikToks recently about really bad bosses that try to get their employees to do unpaid overtime and cover shifts when they can't, like texting while they're on vacation. Oh my God. Like, they don't realize, like people, the bad bosses of those times, they don't realize that they're losing money in the long run by burning people out.
I want to talk about networking because you are a very confident person. Like, you exude.
That's what you think.
No, but that's what I'm saying, though. Like, you exude a lot of confidence, and you exude a lot of self-assuredness and just good vibes.
Thank you.
You have very good vibes. I
really appreciate
and it
that.
Translates to people.
That's really kind of you to say. I really, really, really appreciate that. A lot of it's faked. Like,
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, it's all about that. Fake it till you make it. Yeah. And that's the thing about imposter syndrome is, like, what am I doing, right? Why am I here? And for me, I also have pretty bad anxiety. Not really diagnosed or anything, but do you know how often I end conversations and think, okay, what did I do wrong here? What did I do wrong there?
Literally same. Literally every single day.
It's so bad, and like, there's a lot hiding under that confidence there. One thing I saw on Reddit once, you have to turn your imposter syndrome into what's called brilliant con man syndrome. So it's the thing with imposter syndrome, like, especially as a conductor, more than anything, it's like, you're never gonna think that you belong. You're never gonna think, I'm qualified, I'm here for a reason. I mean, maybe at some point you will, but especially in my stage right now, and like especially in the beginning stages, you're never gonna feel like you're qualified. You're never gonna feel like you belong. So you have to embrace that. Brilliant con man syndrome says, do I deserve to be here? Fuck no. Am I gonna do it anyway? Fuck yeah. Like, yes. That's how it is. Like, that's exactly how it is. It's like, yeah.
You know what's I don't know if it's because in bands, the conductors on the raised podium, I often have this image with, like, student conductors where it's like the band is kind of like raising them up, like, because when you're up there, or when other people are up, like especially students, like when students are up there conducting, everyone in the band is just like, we're all rooting for you.
That's really a beautiful way of looking at it, and it's so optimistic. And I'm very cynical. Also, I'm going to say that now. I'm a cynical person. I wish everybody thought like you, because the whole thing
most people, I'd say, like,
most people
at
your
least
age
like
do.
75% of people in
your age.
Yeah.
Here's my thing. I get cynical, but there are definitely 75% sounds about right. There are definitely at least 25% of people who I swear think they can just do it better and then just judge and just, like, I know my anxieties are coming out here.
Like, have you met people that...
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, no.
Absolutely. People who question your leadership. I know tons of them. And I know a few of them in the groups that I work with.
That's so sad.
If the shoe fits.
If you're one of those people and you're listening to this, be nice.
Yeah. You know, I wish. Unicorns and rainbows, I wish. There's always something like that in every field that you work in. But like I said, I might be a little bit more cynical than I should be. But the reason I prefer conducting youth groups over adult groups is that exactly. It's that I feel a lot less judged by a youth group. It gets complex because now we're also we're getting into the territory of autonomy and kind of like teaching pedagogy versus like musical leadership and direction. If you're working with a group of musicians who already all know what they're doing, you have to approach conducting completely differently. And that's why Rouge River Winds has actually been one of the scarier opportunities of me conducting. Believe it or not, like when I was asking Pratik, I was like, oh, I would really like to conduct in the group. I think, it would be a really good experience for me. And I was all uppity and I was like, yeah, great. But then, that was like, even though I'd already been conducting at that point, I stepped in and I was like, why do I feel this? Why do I feel this sense of like being judged? It's because I know there are people in the group that can do this better than me. That's the weirdest part about being a conductor in an adult group. Knowing that you're not the most qualified one, especially in a group full of teachers. Like, Rouge River Winds is a good community band because there's a lot of music teachers. There's a lot of people who take music seriously, but not seriously enough to be a professional player. So it's like, but they're on that spectrum. They're practicing and like knowing the music and that kind of like guidance and everything. Like, they take it very seriously. And I'm a conductor who doesn't teach. And that's the weird part for me as well. There's so many barriers that get in the way of conducting adult groups. But that being said, I'm auditioning for to be the conductor of Pickering Community Concert Band on Tuesday.
Very cool.
I really hope that works out. I've heard that group is like very mixed in skill level, so people can come and leave as they please. So it's a little less pressure than Rouge River Winds, honestly. Rouge River Winds, there is a standard, and that's what I need to feel like I bring myself up to. Yes, it's a community band, so it's not quite that much pressure, but they play music that's a little bit harder than an average community band does. Grade 5.5, 6 pieces. You never see that in a community band. That's rare. That's really rare, especially in Canada, of all places, like Ontario. We're among one of the tougher community bands to be a part of, and conducting in the group has proved to be a pretty scary thing.
Can feel like really, for me anyways, like there's like a kind of insecurity of when you're leading a group and telling them things that that they already know.
Exactly. That's why, and that's why conducting is tricky, because they always, like, when I go to symposiums and they always tell me, talk less, do things more and talk less. And I've heard recently as a piece of advice was, don't talk for the sake of talking. And it is good advice, but it's really freaking hard to apply that, because you find yourself nervous, and I'm a rambler, so. Me too. That's the one thing I do.
I go off on tangents that I think are, I often go off on tangents about, Gen Z humor or like Gen Z inside jokes.
I hope you get,
and they're just like, they're like,
set a limit on that. Oh man, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta appeal to the younger generation.
But
for sure.
See, if you dab in front of a group of 8-year-olds, they will go wild. If you dab in front of a group of 14-year-olds, they'll just look at you and wonder what you're doing.
I love it. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my god. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. But at the end of my placement, one of them, she told me that I was a real one. So
amazing. Hey, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, no, like humor, right? As a leader, as a conductor, humor is huge. That is one of the most important things.
But it's like you said, not taking yourself too seriously.
Yes, exactly.
What you were saying about people saying to talk less. I remember one time when I was in high school, my teacher was mentoring this other student in conducting, and he had her do this exercise where I don't think it went too well, like from a practical standpoint, but it was a really cool exercise regardless, where he said to her, you can't, so you're going to lead the rehearsal and you can't talk. And if the band does something that you want to adjust or change, you have to stop, show them the gesture, and then have them play it again based on the gesture you gave them, like without saying a word.
That's hard. Man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
That is one of the things they do at conducting symposiums. You ever been to one?
I actually haven't.
You should. You should. And I know it's expensive. That's the biggest barrier of conducting symposiums. They don't happen often. When they do happen, the best ones are in the U.S. They're a week long, and they're like $1,000 US to go to. They're ridiculous. Ontario has some decent ones. York University does like $100 one-day one. U of T does like a...
It's like a summer one with Jillian, right?
Summer week-long one, $300 or so.
I wanted to play in that one.
Yeah, you should. You should ask this year. I'm doing it, so you should ask. Seeing you will probably make me feel a little bit better. Symposiums are like so important. I wish that they mandated teachers to go to symposiums to humble themselves. Do you know how much work? Oh my God, how much?
I think that would be great, especially for music teachers, because not all people who have the music teachable have been in front of a band, and it can be so scary when you are stuck with an LTO in music, where you do know stuff about music, but you've never been in a band environment, and so it's like such a different thing.
Yep, you need the experience, you really do.
Yeah. We talked about kind of like the imposter syndrome and like being very outgoing, maybe not always feeling that way as a conductor, but do you have, despite what you say, I do think that like just because of your natural personality, you're kind of a little bit more advantaged towards that realm than other people.
Part of it's natural.
Maybe. Yeah.
Part of it's natural. Part of it is
like a personality
learned.
thing, but like not. I don't mean to discount like what you're saying. Yeah.
I get you.
It's the struggle is real.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, do you have advice for people who are on the more introverted side and just
I really like this question.
A really shy person.
I really like this question. As a conductor, you have to start with a smile. You have to smile at your group. If you don't, they're not gonna feel welcome. They're not gonna feel like they can play the best they can. I talk as if things are objective.
But I feel like that's objective. Like if you're not, again, going back to, I'm so passionate about this, even though I don't necessarily practice what I preach, like when I'm playing music, but like the body is so important, and your connection with your body is so important, and if you don't feel confident in yourself, or if you don't feel comfortable in a space and you're playing like with fear, it's gonna be reflected in how you're carrying yourself in your body, and that's gonna be affected in your sound.
Yeah, 100%. You've hit the nail on the head. You're exactly right. It's so subconscious. Like this is all intrinsic. This is nothing. We don't think about this as we do it. We just do it.
I think that there needs to be more crossover between choir pedagogy and band pedagogy.
I agree. Yeah. I totally agree. Even like as technical as bright versus dark like sounds, like asking a choir to go like O and E, right? Like ask a band to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Help them hear the difference, right?
And there is a difference, like just the vowels that you use when you're playing. It's crazy. Yes. It's actually so crazy.
It's really, and flute more than anything because it's so like direct mouth to instrument.
Yeah.
But even with mouthpieces and reeds and all that, like every little thing you do makes a huge difference. But yeah, like I was saying before, there's no time to talk about any of this because wind bands are always worried. Like they always have to use every second that they have effectively to make the music as best as possible. But sometimes that like there's more short-term goals than long-term goals.
Yeah.
And that's why band class is really important. But
it's interesting that you say that there's no time, because like I totally relate to that, especially like when you're in front of a group and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of, I guess also because band rep is so long. You can have like a 15-minute piece that you're playing.
Try orchestra. You ever played an orchestra before?
I actually haven't. No.
You should, because like
I don't know if I could sit through a half-hour piece.
I think you can. I think because orchestra is like a lot of orchestra pieces, especially like the tough ones, are really, really involved for a certain amount of time, and then when you're resting, you're actually enjoying the music. Frozen Cathedral. That's exactly what I feel. Is like when brass is playing, we are killing ourselves, but there's a good chunk of break in the middle, and during that break, I'm just absorbing. I'm just resting. I'm like, oh, I'm so thankful that I don't have to hurt my face right now. That's what happens in orchestra, and the more you rehearse a piece, the more you like know what's coming, and the more like you hear, oh, they did that better this time. I think that's kind of how I got into conducting, actually, now that I think about it. It's like I'm interested in hearing people improve their playing, and I'm like, oh, I know when this has to be, oh, I know what they can do to make that sound better. Like, it's kind of a control freak thing, to be honest with you, but I try to, like, that's what leadership is learning to channel your control freak. You know what I mean? Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, not necessarily about the control freak thing, even though it's like, I'm sure most people can relate. When you go up to conduct at Rouge River, and you know you're up there for like almost weeks, like every other week.
I was, yeah. I'm taking a break for this concert.
So, but like, you know, it's been on a pretty consistent basis. I remember every week being like, oh my gosh, I really like what he did there. Like this thing that he did here was really, really effective. And it's been cool, like when you see someone come up so consistently and you see the improvement. It's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And
that's my favorite thing about teaching. When they get it, and it's just like you're rejoicing with them. It's like, you did it!
So here's the thing. You always notice it in other people. You really think you notice it in yourself?
No, definitely not.
And that's why I need validation, and that's why I'm very thankful for you and like holding me in this regard and telling me that I'm doing well. I really, really appreciate it.
Well.
I always take feedback, right? Like my thing, even when I was doing so in my master's, I conducted the group in both years, right? And at the end of my first year of conducting in my master's, I asked the group, can you fill out an anonymous survey to give me feedback, right? And like, even knowing like it's going to be hurt, like it might be hurtful, it might be this, it might be that. There was one answer that gave criticism with no constructive, like nothing constructive, and I'm like, I don't take you seriously. If you're just going to tell me I'm bad, I'm not going to listen to you because you have nothing to tell. Like, you have no reason to tell me. Like, what am I bad at? What am I not doing properly?
A piece of advice that really, really impacted me positively was that, because I'm the same way. I always want to take people's feedback, but especially in the arts, it can be very subjective. And so the piece of advice I got was, you can take people's feedback and consider it, sort of see its merit, but it's up to you whether or not you're going to like take it and apply it to what you're doing. Like, if you don't agree with it, you don't have to use it. And also, like, you don't have to, like, at different, this is more of like a creative process thing, but like at different stages of your creative process, you don't have to ask for feedback. Just because you're doing it doesn't mean that you have to get feedback in that moment. In conducting, it could be like, first rehearsal, maybe this is the rehearsal where, like, okay, I'm not going to ask for feedback because I know what I want to work on. But on like the last rehearsal or the second last rehearsal, I feel like I'm in a good position to receive.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, I always want to improve, right? That's why I want feedback. But that's why I don't want non-constructive criticism.
And like people have to know how to give feedback.
That's what I mean. Like, you tell me there's a problem. Tell me how. Can I do something better? Can I? He's like, and then they just say, no, I can't see what you're doing. Like, okay, so like I guess I'll try other things, whatever. Yeah. And anyway, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Sounds like a problem with them. Yeah. Where in that case, you have to be like, thank you, I appreciate it, but we're not gonna receive it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, this is related to what we were speaking of right now. Do you have any practice tips for musicians specifically?
I don't practice as much as I want to, mainly because of like the time. When I get something that's really hard, that I know I need to practice for it, that yes, I make time for it. I have to. Like, there's just no choice. Like, if I don't know this part, I guess, unfortunately, this is not the healthiest thing, but one of the main motivators of practicing is like, I don't want to make a fool of myself in the group. Like, I want to pull my weight. I want to do
that's a valid motivation, though.
Yeah, you know,
like when you're playing with a group, you want to be part of it.
Yeah, you want to know you don't want to drag the group down.
Yeah.
Right? And it can get into unhealthy territory if you obsess over it and you're like, okay, if I don't do this, I'm useless, right? No, it's not
Me.
that. No, you shouldn't think that way. Like, you shouldn't go too deep in that way.
Yeah.
But practicing, I mean, at a technical standpoint, there's always the advice of you have to do it 3 times in a row for it to be acceptable perfectly, that kind of thing. My actually, one of the other guys that I brought in for this concert, Eric, he's a horn guy, he told me the other day, like, rather than doing it 3 times in a row, if you play an excerpt and you mess it up, you add 3 times in a row. So if you play it once, perfect, second time, perfect, third time you mess it up, then you have to do it 3 more times after that. So it's like, you have to do it like 5 times in a row, and it's like, oh my God, it's like that discipline, it's next level. Yeah. I don't quite have it as much as that, Eric. I appreciate the advice, but 3 times in a row, sure, good enough. You need to use a metronome, the panic tempo thing. Oh, it happens so often. It's very common with youth groups, right? Yeah, it's a musical maturity and patience to play something slowly before you speed it up. It's so important. It's so cliche, but it's so important. You have to be able to play it at every tempo. Well, up to a certain point, you know what I mean? But like, you have to be,
Speaking of the panic tempo, it reminds me of something that my flute teacher would say to me. He would say, don't practice faster than the performance tempo. Because if you practice faster than during the performance, the adrenaline's going to be running through you, and you're going to play it faster. So if you're practicing it faster than how you're going to play it on the performance, it's going to go even faster than that.
It always happens in performances. It's all performance tempo, it's a term, right?
What do you think is the most important thing for young musicians to believe about themselves?
I'm going to be cliche and say that they can, if they want to. You know, it's that no one is inherently better than someone else. Do what you feel you should be doing and like what you're motivated to do. It takes the right kind of guidance. So if you don't have the right kind of guidance, seek it. And that's the thing about like Gen Zs and Millennials and Gen Alphas too, is that if they have options, be loud, be verbal, be vocal about your discontent if you have any. If you're like, I don't like my piano teacher, tell them.
Honestly, like if one of my students came to me and said, I find that I'm not learning anything, I'd say, okay, well, let's either adjust something that we're doing in our lessons, or let's find you someone who you really connect with.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, so that's the thing that musical leaders have to be able to swallow their ego for, is like, no, you're not perfect. No, not everything you do is going to cater to everyone. That's my issue. My biggest flaw, I think, is that I want to lead in a way that gets to every single member, but that's just not possible.
Yeah, I've struggled with that a lot too.
I'll settle with the majority. That's what I want to do, is like, okay, if I can't get everyone, at least the majority. If specific people have a problem with me, there's only so much you can do to change that, right? Some people, I'm an acquired taste, I've heard, to some people, you know.
I find that for people who kind of live out their truth, it's always going to be like a quote unquote acquired taste. Like, it's not going to please everyone. Like, if you water yourself down so much as to be pleasing to everyone, then
you're going to please no one at some
point. Yeah.
I used to actually teach P-buzz. Do you know what a P-buzz is?
No.
So, do you know what a P-bone is?
No.
Plastic trombone. They literally make plastic trumpets and trombones now. P-trumpet, P-trombone. P-buzz is a more primitive version of a trombone. It only has 5 slide positions. It's meant to only play C to G. It's plastic. Yeah. It's for kids to learn. I taught 4, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds how to play the P-buzz for 2 years at the Royal Conservatory of Music. And the exact thing you're mentioning of like, there's one kid who just doesn't play. There's only so much you can do. Like, you can ask them, like, oh, you sure you don't want to play? It's fun, like, make them laugh and that kind of thing. Certain kids, they just got to go through their own journeys.
Mm-hmm.
There's this one kid, and she kind of refused to play in the first year that I taught her. And I was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, of course, my anxiety was like, oh, you're the problem, right? But everyone else was fine. Yeah. There you go, Gen Z humor. And I was, okay. And then, but every other kid was doing, like, kind of fine. And I was like, I wonder what that's about. She actually ended up coming back to camp. I think it was that same year, the next camp or the camp after that, and then also the year after that. And then she was like one of the leaders back at that point. It's like when she was first starting to play, she's like, I don't like P-Buzz. And I was like, oh, shoot, I'm sorry to hear that. But then she came back next year and like, I love P-Buzz. I'm like, oh, what the heck? Okay, so yeah,
I'm
sometimes...
just imagining like 4 or 5-year-olds just saying the word P, like,
P-Buzz. They never get the Z. They never get the Z.
Oh, so cute.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, like the impact. I felt like I had an impact on the kid at that point. I was like, wow, okay, good.
And it's funny because like we feel really good when there's an impact, but it's we tend to have the greatest impact when we're not even thinking about us, like where it's like just about the kids.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, last 2 questions. So we kind of touched upon a lot of really, really awesome things, a lot of really good advice. But what resource or piece of advice would you give to your younger self when you were beginning your journey?
I guess the simplest thing to say would just be keep going, keep doing what you're doing. Like, the worst they can say is no. And it depends on how young you were talking, because there was a point where I started university and then dropped out after like partway through my first year. I took 2 years and worked kind of like general labor jobs, had to make money. Like, that was my only, like, I was like, okay, if I'm not going to be in school, I have to work. Then I started working the general labor jobs, and all I was told by the people working there is like, you got to go back to school. That's what your mind's for. That's what you were made for. And I was like, okay. After a certain point, if I'm listening to like so many people say the same thing, yeah, I got to listen to them. And my mom was like one of the main people who was saying that, and I started to feel it at some point. So I enrolled in the winter semester of 2016 at York again, and that was kind of my restart. It was a weird thing because I was starting halfway through the school year, but that's what I did. And
now master's degree.
Yeah. So then, if you were talking to like the version of me that like dropped out, you know, it'd be like, you got to take it easy, man. You got to slow down. You got to like, you know, yeah, weed's fun. And I still think it is, but like, you gotta like you have an addictive personality. So as much as you may think you can't get addicted to weed, it's the whole thing. No, you can, and that's why I actually had to quit like cold turkey. Like, there was a point where I was back in school, yes, got motivated to go back in there, but I was still doing it every day, and found my social skills dipping, which is why I say like my extrovertedness, my you know. Willingness to talk to people, I had to kind of relearn that. As much as you might think it's like intrinsic, part of it is relearning. Also after COVID, I had to relearn as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Big thing, yeah. So, yeah, you got to really stay motivated. And beginning your journey, it's like you have no idea where this is going to go, but just ride with it.
The last question is, do you have a music recommendation for our playlist?
I'm a wind band nerd. I love wind band. I love orchestra.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a every sense of a stereotypical classical nerd. Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 6 Pathétique is one of my favorite orchestral symphonies.
So beautiful.
So haunting and beautiful. So miserable, but in the best way. Wind band symphonies are very underrated. Maslanka Symphony No. 4, it's a bucket list piece of mine to either play or conductor, or probably both. I would love that. Johann de Meij's Big Apple Symphony. It's kind of in the territory of minimalism because it's so repetitive, but you get entranced by its repetitiveness, and it's so fucking hard to play. If you listen to that third movement of Johann de Meij's Big Apple Symphony No. 2. you wonder how does the brass get through that? You really, I don't get it. It's just insane. Hearing like there's a recording of the Toulouse Wind Orchestra, TWO, playing the Big Apple, one of my favorite recordings on this planet. It's just amazing. So that's my music nerd side. I've been getting into Jesus Molina recently. He's a jazz pianist. He's one of the best jazz pianists in the world. You cannot argue with that. That is objective. I'm laying down the law. Jesus Molina is just fantastic. He's just what he does with rhythms and how I don't know if you know what the term metric modulation is. Have you ever heard of that before?
Yeah.
When you take a time signature and then use a pulse within that time signature to do a different time signature, he does that kind of crazy stuff but makes it sound good at the same time. I love Jacob Collier because he does microtonality stuff and that kind of stuff too, metric modulation as well. His early music does tend to sound kind of like a technical exercise. His Jesse Volume 4 is getting a lot more enjoyable with that, and his collabs are just all over the top. Jacob Collier is the only non-classical person I've ever seen live. So I look forward to seeing him more and more. Yeah, I know. And if I ever get the chance to see Jesus Molina, I don't give a fuck how much the tickets are. I will go. His album, Departing, is just fantastic.
Thank you so much for being here. This was such a fun conversation.
Yes, it really was.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Bedroom Studios podcast. Don't forget to add this podcast to your playlist and to like and follow. We are on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at Bedroom Studios Podcast. Also follow our playlist of guest music recommendations and music our guests have created. We are starting a new series called Song Spotlight, where we will be featuring music from podcast guests and also artists in the GTA. So check that out in the link in our bio or in the description of this video. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.